Today, we're here at the HR Engage podcast. My name's Jonathan Mamaril. We're here today with Natasha Hydon. How you going, Natasha?
Hey, Jonathan, I'm going well. How are you?
Good, Natasha. Now, Natasha, I could do the whole LinkedIn thing. I could definitely, you've got an illustrious career in all types of areas, all types of industries, but you're here in front of us. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
I usually use a lot of words, and so I did a little exercise a few years ago to try and work out if there was one word to describe me, what would it be? And the word I came up with is connection. I'm all about connection, whether that's connecting people, connecting systems, connecting communities, or connecting ideas. It's all about making links, making meaning, making connection, having value. While I operate and think almost exclusively outside that bell curve, I'm really comfortable in amongst people. I want to be engaging, observing, learning, contributing, understanding, and having a good time while I'm doing it. My curiosity in the human condition and the human experience is never quite ending.
Yep.
And where I am right now is I'm a city girl from Melbourne who has unexpectedly, with a husband, found a home here in remote northwest Queensland, where I've been for the last 6 years. So more than one word, connection, but that's me in a nutshell.
Well, tell us a little about that, because that's a fantastic story. You've come from down south, which is not a problem. So tell us how you've made your journey all the way through from down in another state, going to a different state, going into HR, and also tell us a little bit about what you've done now as well, too.
Okay, so the journey was not one that we planned in any great detail. In fact, it happened watching TV while we were folding washing, and we were living an experience in metropolitan Melbourne. We both had great jobs, great networks. We'd been through some hard times in the trying to start a family, and we just decided to ask ourselves, did we want to do something different? So we decided to go on a 3-year adventure to Queensland. So we applied for jobs, got jobs in government sectors where we were. I was in the state government, David was in local government.
Yep.
And
was it in HR still, or just something different?
No, I wasn't in HR. I was on the side of HR in that I was doing a lot of facilitation and a lot of business improvement. So I found myself working with lots of different teams throughout, at the time, the Department of Health, and learning that as unique as every business was, their ability to achieve and succeed was really based on their people and about their human resource. So it was a circuitous route to HR through business improvement, through facilitating, through an interest in learning and development that ultimately resulted in HR. But not in Brisbane. I stayed in project management, so in the HR team, but managing projects. And our 3-year Brisbane experiment turned into 11 years. And my husband's journey in local government came to a bit of an end. He wanted to do something new.
Yep.
He relocated to Mount Isa to become a primary school teacher, and I thought that would be fun to do. And so I came with him, and one more year in project management, but really HR focused. And then an opportunity came up to run an HR team for a small not-for-profit here in Mount Isa. And what was great about happening in Mount Isa is I would have never got that opportunity in the city. They would have thought you don't have enough experience. A few less choices in Mount Isa. They give you a bit of a go in a lot of country towns. And interestingly, going from no experience to having to run the whole gamut, there I was 12 months later, a pretty experienced HR manager with industrial relations, recruitment, learning and development, engagement strategies, unions, you name it, I did it. Sometimes I was only about half a step in front of what I needed to know, and other times I needed to phone a friend, but always with people at the focus and understanding that if we invested in people, our business would happen. And then I had the opportunity to come into HR here in council, which I've done for the last 3 years. And after 25 years in and on the side of HR, I've actually just pivoted back out of HR into a regulatory role, the functions of regulation, development, land use, environmental, local laws, biosecurity. But the focus is really strategic with people at the core. But this time, instead of just the people as the employees, I've also got the people as in the Mount Isa community in my frame and my purview. So all those HR skills are coming into play in a really localised but strategic role. So
I want to pick up on that. You've said that your HR skills have actually helped you in terms of pivoting to a more strategic a role, which is a bit more across the board for council. Do you think that there was a particular focus in human resources that helped you do that? Or do you think the overall gamut of human resource and what you guys have to do has actually helped you?
I think that one of the surprising things is realising how legislatively driven we are in HR, and that's something that people forget. And I could talk all day about the amount of legislation that I have to, and any HR manager knows or practitioner knows, there's a lot of legislation we need to be abreast of to do our jobs. So coming into that regulatory role, that was a real bonus that no one really thought about. But I think the number one key thing is I can listen for the problem. In HR, there's a lot of noise. There's a lot of emotion. There can sometimes be blame, worry, a very one-eyed view of things. And you learn very quickly that you need to listen to all the stories and put that against the context in which they're operating, both politically, environmentally, what's going on for them and the organisation, and work out what's really going on. And one of the pieces of advice I like to give people is work the problem, not the person.
Okay.
And bringing that skill into an environment where operationally I'm not the best, I'm not the expert, I'm a manager of a team of experts, but I have to listen for the problem and not solve the people. And, that can sometimes just take a minute, and you need to be comfortable to be able to pause and try and work out what's really going on and maybe ask some more questions.
That pivot has been something a bit different, and it's obviously only recent as well. I want you to sort of go back and put your HR hat on, or complete HR hat on, and I suppose give us a rundown as to why you're passionate and really enjoy human resources, or would encourage people to undertake human resources as a career.
Oh, for sure, it's where the heartbeat is for me. An organisation, AI is coming and we've got all the smarts and the technology, but at the heart of things is people. So at the heart of organisations is people. And I have such a genuine interest in people. I like seeing people grow. I like seeing people discover, blossom, see them succeed. It's why I like watching babies, because you get to see that really quickly. And if you think about an organisation or a new organisation or a new team, that's in its infancy. And I like being part of equipping people to be able to do the things that they need to do to be successful. My dad taught me a long, long time ago, he's always aimed to be the dumbest person in the room. That doesn't mean remain unaware and uneducated. It means surround yourself by talent. Some of my greatest joys are interviewing people for a job and knowing that in 2, 5, 10, 15 years, they're going to be 15 rungs above me, because you can see the potential. Someone that discovers they've got a skill that they didn't know because you helped them open it up by offering a training course or offering a mentoring opportunity or shadowing someone and watching someone evolve from what they thought they just were to what they can be. That's the MasterCard priceless moment. That is being involved in HR. We've got a fair share of legislation and, sort of the churn, as I like to call it, which can make you tired, but it's those gems of watching people succeed that really makes me passionate about HR.
What is it about your journey, Natasha? Because you've got a really illustrious journey to HR. Are there moments in time where you thought to yourself, this is the path that I want, this is the path I want to be on? Were there particular moments in time, and could you tell us a little bit about that?
They certainly were, but there are also moments of immense doubt. And I think those two things happening together. But the other thing about it all was that I've been really lucky to have mentors my whole career, whether I knew I had mentors or not, whether I chose them specifically. Often they weren't formal, but people guiding me, starting with my folks, my parents, they invested in education. So I learnt really early on that education was important and that it could open doors, and that if you applied yourself, it was interesting. And then through my journey, my first degree was primary school teaching, and I got to the end of it and freaked out because I got a job about 2 hours away from Melbourne in a place called Ballarat.
Yeah.
And I thought, what can I can't do this. I've been at school and at uni. I can't teach kids about the world. I don't know anything. So I freaked out and had a moment of crisis and took a state government job. And that was literally working in the mailroom, opening mail. And someone once told me I'd be grateful for that experience, and I thought they were patronising. They were correct.
Yep.
That experience led to an opportunity to train people in a new system. And because I had that teaching background, that was really natural. So that was my first little moment where I liked engaging. I liked developing plans to help people learn, and I learnt that people learn in different ways and at different pace. And as you become an adult, there's a much more kinesthetic style. So I started to learn to be able to adapt to what other people need. And that was my start of my journey about it not just being about me, that I was part of something bigger. And by listening to people and meeting their needs, I got to be a trainer. I got to do what I wanted to do, and they would succeed. So that was probably a moment I thought, I want to be in training, or training's HR. Then I veered away from HR because every time I heard human resources, I heard industrial relations. And that was lawyers and stuff. And that was scary, trade unions and tribunals and industrial relations commissions. And that, so I steered away and lived in that project space.
Yep.
And I found myself teaching and looking at business improvement and telling people to be innovative, to take risks, and to be curious. And there I was, because I was doing something that other people find difficult, public speaking and engaging with people, I was actually being really safe.
Yeah.
And really hiding behind something that was safe for me, but a little scary for other people, but I really wasn't pushing myself. So I did the natural thing and signed up for another university course and did an MBA and did the scary subjects like finance and international law and marketing, which I still don't understand, but and I started saying yes. And I think that's what has defined the later part of my career through government changes, shake-ups, org structural changes in state government. And I've survived because I've been willing to pivot and willing to say yes. In recent years, I actually orchestrated this change that I've made because I realised I was at the end of my HR journey, but I needed to change what I did. And I knew that because I saw the enthusiasm of the people coming through in my own team.
Yeah.
And I didn't carry that same enthusiasm for that work. I needed to grow some more. And that meant I needed to pivot again. During that whole thing, other opportunities outside of work came up. I got opportunities outside of work, and it's really funny when you're open to yes and you put yourself out there, how lucky you get. So I've recently come back from a trip where I've adjudicated an international dance competition. It wasn't my dance knowledge. It was my engagement and my HR skills that allowed me to do that. My other pivot recently is I took the stage as a stand-up comic. Being able to observe and listen and not take myself too seriously enabled me to put together a little set that wasn't, up there with world standards, but I didn't tank. That was, again, putting myself in a really vulnerable position and saying yes and just being open to opportunities. And I think my career in HR has impacted my life choices, and my life choices have impacted my career in HR because I'm broad and I'm more broad-minded and I'm more open to seeing a range of different perspectives and attitudes because I've had the very, very highs and I've had the very, very lows. So when someone comes into my office and is having a low, I can be empathetic, but then I can be a problem solver. When someone comes in and wants to blame everybody else and worry about things, I can actually play devil's advocate and say, well, how's that working for you? And try to get them to get back in the driver's seat rather than being a victim to everything that's happening to them. And that comes with experience as well as kind of the textbook knowledge.
I suppose I want to pick up on a few points there that you've just talked about, Natasha. So for those who are listening, you can't see this, but for those who are actually watching, Natasha has purple, pink, and I think there might be some blue in the hair. everywhere I've met Natasha at conferences, at presentations. She's so engaging. Natasha's one of the people that engages people, engages the room. No matter who she's talking to, she's like a magnet in terms of interaction, and the passion flows out of you, Natasha, no matter what you're talking about, really. I want to go back a little bit deeper and go back to the early career Natasha. I suppose, what advice would you give to the early career Natasha? What would you say to her?
Be grateful for the early years opportunities.
Yep.
A little bit like growing up. Don't be too eager to get where you think you want to go too quickly. I mean, you've got the kids that are coming out of uni and wanting to be executive directors, but really embrace and enjoy the early years where you can learn, you can try new things, you can change your career path, you can test yourself, and you can ask the dumb questions. In fact, there are no dumb questions, just the one that you're too scared to ask. So someone once said to me, I'd be grateful for my time in records and in the mailroom. And, you know, I still remember the early version of me in my three-piece suit walking down Collins Street, and walking towards me was someone from my university class. And I had a trolley, and I literally pushed it into the bushes and just told him I was on the way to a meeting, and was really embarrassed about what I did. But back then in the early 90s, in the mailroom,
yep,
I was the first person to read what was being written to the minister, to the secretary of the department, to my director. I knew what was going on with the private prison scheme, which was a new big thing in Victoria, before the people on the 14th floor knew. Yep. So I started to take notice, I started to listen, I started to educate myself and take advantage of the fact that a lot of people thought that the people that worked in the mailroom were illiterate and not interested. So, you know, I started to grow my information knowledge, and my very first team leader role was actually running reception and the mailroom for a local council, and I gave that advice to some young staff. Two of those staff members are now partners in Deloitte, and one runs her own business.
Wow.
So they ran with the advice and went really, really far in their careers, and they weren't in a hurry. They were happy to take those steps. And yeah, don't be too eager to look like you know what you're doing. Spend time learning what you need to know so you do know what you're doing, and make it really authentic.
That's some great advice for those, I suppose, early career people in HR. I mean, in general, but HR in particular, I think that's a great piece of advice, a nice nugget of gold. Natasha, I want you to provide maybe two big pieces of advice you would have for any person currently in human resources. So those who are in the midst of it, they're in the fight right now. They've got legislation coming this way and that way. They've got retention, recruitment issues. They've got AIs here. They've got mergers and acquisitions, redundancy, work from home. There's just so much coming at them. What are two big pieces of advice you've got for them?
Three. So the first one is, if you're an organized person, use those organizational skills really smartly. If you're not, if being a completer finisher is not your strong suit, and I'm going to be up there and say, I'm the starter inventor, not the completer finisher, surround yourself with people that have got those skills and put systems in place to make it easier for yourself. So compensate for your deficiency in that area. You can work on it, but you're never going to be as naturally great at it. So give yourself some tools. The second piece of advice is use your own brain every day. As you said, there's a lot of stuff coming at you. There's a lot of legislation. There's a lot of AI, and it's very easy to regurgitate, whether it's the acceptance letter or the redundancy letter or the letter about meeting with the union. Try and engage your own brain and put your own thinking into everything that you do every day, else you start to lose your confidence in being able to work those solutions. If you're always looking for a template that's got your thinking in it, that's detrimental to you. Your template can have your format, but use your own brain. And the third piece of advice I'd give to anyone working in HR, and basically anyone who works, but HR in particular, have a process where you pack your day away, where you take what you've done for the day and you put it somewhere safe till tomorrow. So you're not taking it home with you, festering over it, lying awake at night. If you do find yourself waking up at night and worrying about an HR issue, Ask yourself the next day what you can do better to pack it away. If you really have to take a note, keep a notebook on the side of your nightstand. Do not put your phone on and start Googling HR solutions at 2:00 in the morning. Pack it away.
Yep.
No good things happen after midnight. So is that 4 pieces of advice?
That's a great other piece of advice.
And that's about looking after your own social safety as well, because as an HR practitioner, it would be very easy never to turn off and never stop trying to fix a problem. But you're not going to be any good to anybody if you don't get your sleep, your rest, your downtime, and a bit of work-life balance. So turn it off, pack it away. I have a colleague who walks a certain way to her car, and as she walks through a canopy of trees, she leaves her day behind. I go through a little bit of process as I pack my bag. Into my bag, I take things out of my brain, and as I drive past a certain street, works behind me, homes in front of me. So, wow. Yeah, that's some strategies I use to keep the sanity.
So it's not just the metaphorical or in principle, but also even something physical or visual that also assists with that separation too.
Absolutely. And especially living in a small town like I do, you see people you see your colleagues all the time, people see you, and you don't want to be having a work conversation that never ends.
Yeah.
You need that separation.
So many great tips there. One of the things, obviously, is in HR, there are just so many challenges. But in your view, Natasha, what is the biggest challenge that is facing HR right now, and what is your, I suppose, opinion or views on how to tackle it?
Oh, wow. Tackling it. Look, I think the biggest one for me right now that's been around for the last 12 months and is not going anywhere is psychosocial safety.
Yeah.
And particularly the role of the HR practitioner and the organisation, about what the organisation and HR are there to do, what their responsibilities are. And I know there's a code, but where the line is. When is it personal responsibility? How far do we go? How far do we not go? What I'm seeing now is managers worrying about people's psychosocial safety, coming to HR and then trying to nut out where to go, but forgetting to include the person in the conversation, because your own mental wellness is your own business and your own journey, and work isn't there to look after your psychosocial safety, but work can't impede it. Work can't make it worse and contribute to a negative outcome. What's happening is, because there's so much attention on it, you have situations sometimes when a manager might say, it's time to do your performance review, and the staff member will come back and say, that triggers me, I'm having a psychosafety moment, I can't do it. So what's natural management? What's an appropriate conversation? How do you give frank and fearless feedback in this environment? I don't want to belittle mental health, and I want to promote mental wellness, but it's learning how we operate in this environment where it is very real, but there are also pockets where people are not being genuine about the effects of it. So I think it's a minefield. I think it's very interesting. It goes along with my interest in observing the human condition. Mm-hmm. What I do know is teams that are healthy, that have good communication, strong culture of feedback, don't have as many issues in this area as teams that don't have those cultures. And it's not because people are magically better suited or have better mental wellness. It's because they've got foundations in place, which means it's possible to have good conversations and good communication.
Yes. Yeah. I suppose with psychosocial, it's such a prevalent topic in the workplace. And of course, as such, for human resources, for example, I know that yourself, Natasha, have put a lot of investment, time, everything into, training management teams and leadership teams, not just awareness. Awareness is just part of it, not just identifying and assessing, not just putting in controls, because that is, the legislative framework, but also how it connects with the rest of work. So, it's okay to deal with a situation of a psychosocial situation in its own bubble. That's fine. And I think most people can sort of deal with that. But when it sort of permeates through work, productivity, other people, and how it affects other people, that's where it becomes a little bit more difficult. And that's where the nuances of leadership and management and how they deal with that is as much more difficult. It's a much more difficult conversation to have.
Absolutely. And what I'm starting to see at the moment is if you have an HR matter that ends up in a dispute and mediation or outcomes, the people involved in that case may or may not be happy and come back, and the repercussions can sometimes be an impact of the psychosafety of the HR practitioners involved in running, because they're getting pushback from whoever was unhappy with the outcome, and then they're being targeted for those outcomes, and then the actual psychosafety of those actual practitioners starts to get compromised, and then they start to doubt, did they make the right decision? They doubt their skill set. Were they well supported? And again, the whole thing can escalate. And as you said, it can permeate through different ways. But going back to what I think some of the solutions are, the stronger the culture, the stronger the communication, the stronger the skill set of people that lead and manage, the better that we're going to be able to contend with those issues. They're not going to go anywhere, and some of them are going to remain tricky, but you've got a better chance if you've got that foundation.
Yeah, great point. Going to something a little bit different. So what is the one thing about human resources that people might disagree with you about?
Okay, so for me, it's the lovely phrase called soft skills.
Oh, I know that's one of your pet hates. It's one of your
soft skills doesn't mean lightweight. Soft skills does not mean unnecessary, and soft skills does not mean easy. In fact, what we see time and time again when people get promoted into management roles is if they haven't got those soft skills and they've never learnt them, they don't magically appear on day one.
It's a struggle.
You know?
Yeah, it's a struggle.
You know, that people think that HR is, let's go and do kumbaya and have a group hug and let's do some interpretive dance. And while I'm all for that, you know, I think the world would be a better place with more interpretive dance, don't get me wrong. That's not...
For you to judge, of course. For you to judge on a judgment.
I'll judge it. And as many soft skills as we have, we've got hardcore skills in our legislative frameworks that we have to manage, communication and negotiation skills, because we're the team that works with the unions and the lawyers. So, this notion of soft skills are lightweight and they're just, you know, pull them out of your back pocket when you need them and then put them away again is so untrue. It takes a very long time to develop those people-focused skills, and there's not much soft about them. So there's my soapbox moment.
You know what? I think there'll be a lot of people listening to this podcast who would absolutely agree with you. I suppose especially the development of this new type of legislation or new pieces of legislation has definitely, Right to Disconnect is another one which has probably brought this along even further. But I think you look at it from an overall perspective, even looking at what staff or employees want out of their managers and leaders, what they're looking for in terms of joining an organization, those skills, you know, are not necessarily the technical skills that people are looking for. They're looking for those other skills where they can bring them on a journey, they could build them up, they can mentor them, get them better, get them to a level where they want to be. But those things, those types of skills don't happen overnight, and they need fostering. They need, you need to be able to make mistakes with it too. Hopefully, it's not a mistake that it goes into the commission. It does happen, but those are. But if you look at, and I've done this before, where I've looked at so many cases over the last 3 or 4 years. A lot of it comes from, sure, there's miscommunication, but a lot of it came from non-communication, nothing at all. Correct. Where at some point, a leader or a manager, usually a manager, but a leader as well, has not said anything at all because they want to keep their head in the sand. And that's manifests into something technically brilliant at what they do, but didn't even just not miscommunication, didn't have the conversation. Could have been about performance, could have been about whatever it is.
And one of my favourite things in HR, and I talked about watching people grow and develop.
Yeah.
You know, it's not just junior staff that I like watching grow and develop, it's managers. And one thing that started to happen in my office after a couple of years here at council is managers would wander in my office and ask if I had 5 minutes, and they wanted to toss something around.
Yep.
And they were practicing. They were practicing their communication skills, their messaging, their forthrightness, their model of feedback. They were really trying to say, I need to communicate, but I just want to test myself. Or I want to practice my soft skills, but I'm not really comfortable because I'm so much better designing a bridge than I am talking about, you know, tardiness in the workplace or, you know, my workplace culture. So watching them practice those skills was acknowledging their growth and their growth need, but also acknowledging that those skills were required and necessary and helpful. And started to get people to realise that the HR chat in their team meetings wasn't a waste of time, and it's worth actually putting as much energy into that as reviewing the budget numbers or talking about what the operational deliveries are this week. So watching that sort of thing and people evolve has always been something I've really liked doing. And, you know, when a management team values the HR manager and you get a few bad scores in the staff survey, you know that you're hitting all your marks.
The evolution, right, of managers, because usually there is some sort of target or productivity target or there's a budget or something like that, right? There's a hard number or something a bit more harder in terms of what's expected of that team, whatever that team might be. How do you then go, well, the development of these types of skills, let's call them sort of more HR type skills, you know, basically talking to people. How do you then go, okay, well, the ability to do this better or even do it and then do it better has the ability to also affect your more harder numbers or your harder skill sets. How do you correlate that, and how do you have that sort of bridge that gap?
So I used just some good old 101 management theory to help my managers achieve it. So, you know, as you go up the management scale, my CEO is doing, you know, 95% strategic work and 5% operational. The directors are 15%, managers are 20% or 25%, team leaders 50-50. In that non-operational time, I start to get them to think about, you mentioned it actually doing the thing, whether it's performance management or thinking about their staff. Don't even think about how well you're doing it or how long you're doing it. Are you even doing it? So in your non-operational time, start thinking about your team members. Think about them in terms of the tasks you need to do to make them effective. And they're the operational things like making sure their timesheets are done or their performance management plans or their work plans. And then start thinking about the actual investment you're making in them. And then from there, you can start to grow. How much do you know about them? What do you know about their strengths and weaknesses at work? And what are you doing about it? And then when, as a manager, if you've got 80% of your time or 75% of your time is non-operational, at least 50% of that time should be on your staff, the other 50%. So you start making it meaningful. So just start hitting the targets. And, you know, some of the conversations I had with my managers was, that's not really HR's job. They're going, but it's an HR matter. And I'm like, yes. And it's your job as the manager of the area to do that HR piece. Here are some tools. Here's some theory. Here's a little bit of help. I can walk through with you. And so I've sat down with many managers and had a performance conversation. I've sat down with managers to help them prepare for a performance conversation. Because a little bit like teachers in the interview with parents, sometimes they just don't know what to do. So we can model it, but you're teaching them to fish, not catching the fish. But it's all about acknowledging that that's the work they need to be doing. I had a conversation with one of our directors last year, and he had a few managers missing and a few team leaders missing, and he's recruited. And we had a conversation last week, and he said, oh, gee, Tash, thank you so much. I'm so glad you're not in my office so much anymore because now I'm doing real work again. And then he looked at me and he said, oh, the other stuff was real. It's really important. But he had an overload of like the HR side of things because he was doing it for a lot of gaps. But it gave him a real appreciation to how much effort it takes to keep your people on the ground and keep them equipped to deliver what they're there to deliver. And that's our jobs as managers, to keep them equipped and to clear the pathway so they can be successful, which means we need to spend time thinking about them, their strengths, their skills, their gaps, and what we need to do to fill it.
That's a really interesting point, because I think we're now in a phase in the workplace where there needs to be development of those skills no matter what. I think we're now past that point where, you know, I think there's very little managers now that who can just get away with just, we're really good, you know, really good at what we do. I think we're starting at that tipping point now where people just go, well, look, I'm not really happy here. I'm just going to go somewhere else, and it's no big deal. I think there's
absolutely.
That movement of people has essentially precipitated this evolution that's required without even touching the legislation. I think the legislation definitely requires that, but without even touching that, I think the people itself, and especially if you look at local government, local councils, there is so many more options. I mean, Mount Isa is a great example. There's just so many more options that you've got to have something else to keep them there, attract them, but also a retention as well. And if you don't have those fundamental skills, it's difficult, isn't it?
Absolutely. And look, something we don't face as much in Mount Isa as the rest of the world at the moment is staying engaged and managing a workforce that now has a hybrid model. So they're not at work all the time. So not only do you not see your people as much, you don't see them as a full team as much. And, you know, we've got the pendulum swing back a little bit, but it's never going to be like it used to be. So those engagement skills and being able to read the rooms only got trickier. And with working from home and people having to pivot what they did for work during COVID, people discovered that work was a lot more flexible and their skill sets are a lot more flexible. So now more than ever, that adage of people leave managers, not organisations, is very true. And there's somewhere else people can go if your manager isn't, you know, meeting your needs, or at least having a crack at understanding you've got some needs. So that old adage of managers that have got widgets that do stuff for them is a thing of the past.
Let's change track a little bit.
Okay.
Tradition for the HR Engage podcast is ask you a few rapid fire questions, and first thing comes to your mind, just answer it. Okay, you ready?
Yep.
Okay. So, Natasha, what is your favorite movie?
Oh, I've got a couple. Probably The Usual Suspects, Singing in the Rain, and Footloose, the remake.
Whoa. The remake of Footloose.
The remake of Footloose. I love the original, but the remake line dancing sequence at the bar is just the best 5 minutes of my life. It's great.
Wow. I mean, I'm a little bit speechless, but knowing you, I sort of understand where you're coming from. But the remake Footloose. Wow. Okay. All right. Hey, fantastic. Usual Suspects, yes. Singing in the Rain, whoa, fantastic movie. Very different movies though. But to be honest, I can sort of see that. with you, Natasha.
I've got three colours in my hair. I can't choose easily.
Correct. Now I know you do a bit of travel. So, what is your favourite holiday destination?
I'd probably have to say the USA. We've now visited 35 of the 50 states, and within the USA, I'd say, fantastic. North Carolina and Disney World.
Oh yeah, so Disney. Whereabouts is Disney World in America? There's two of them, Disney World and Disneyland.
There's
Florida.
There's one in. So I went to the original first, but Florida is just the bomb. I love it. It's in terms of people watching. Being a grown-up in a child's world, and then looking at the org development, human resources of Disney cast members is fascinating. So there are some really good organisational standards that Disney expects all their cast members to meet. there's actually a thing called Disney College that every cast member has to pass and attend. And I could, if I was going to do my PhD, it's probably going to be Disney focused.
I mean, they are taught in business schools all around the world in terms of how they need to stay in character and all these types of things. I mean, it's pretty amazing. I may have gone down a YouTube route on YouTube rabbit hole on Disney, but I've heard some incredible things. I mean,
the Disney thinking is never have a negative. So if someone is expecting an answer about what you can't do, the Disney cast member will turn it into what you can do.
Yeah.
Every Disney cast member is expected to pick up rubbish if they see it and know where the nearest restrooms are. So, and they're the little things that as a user, get your experience wonderful.
Yeah. I mean, that's the thing, right? When it comes to something like Disney, it's a nice microcosm of, if you could put that into the workplace in terms of that user experience, both internally and externally, then that's a great lesson to have. You could keep that in mind, going forward, because it'll just improve everything, productivity, revenue.
The fascination with it all is that the Walt Disney family, as opposed to the company, is this complex, beautiful disaster of humanity. And, a man that could not stop chain smoking, was a workaholic, was rumoured to be a communist at some point, absolute control freak, ADHD and OCD in there as well. So it's this sort of really messy human condition that built this amazing company. So, fascinating.
So apart from family and friends, who has inspired you the most, Natasha?
So I've got two, and they're a bit different. So from a human justice point of view, and in the macro sense, Nelson Mandela, and just from an absolute amazing human and so complex but so simple and so loved, Miss Dolly Parton is my spirit animal. She is she's engaging, she's uniting, she's made a fortune out of looking simple but being extremely focused and smart, and her gravitas, the people that like her, young, old, land-based, sea-based, black, white, gay, straight, conservative, Democrat, English-speaking or not. She's got such a range of people that support her, and she's magnificent. I love her.
Well, I mean, she was one of the first to sort of go from country mainstream, but also cultural icon. I know there's Elvis previously and everything else, but she was one of those ones that really, got that mainstream to pop from country. And that now happens so much nowadays, but people take that for granted, that actually she was one of the first to really crack that market. But also her brand and her personality. Brand. And but also I was reading a book for my children about her story, and her story is incredible. And I know it's a very simplified version of her story. I know that it's for kids, but it's still incredible what she went through and how she got to where she is.
Absolutely. She was one of the first women to have her own music company. She managed to work for a chauvinistic, misogynist man and helped him keep his dignity, even though he sued her. She went from the little blonde piece on the side to the superstar, and she did that without breaking anybody. She's provided a book. So she has a literacy program that's basically provided a book to every child in America. And her hometown has gone through fire and flood, and she's donated millions of dollars to recovery, put hundreds of kids through university, and had one marriage. So she's quite surprising. She's also the topic of my very favorite podcast, which is called Dolly Parton's America, which
there you go.
So I listened to that driving through America and actually through Tennessee, and absolutely a lot of fun to listen to, but enlightening as well, what she's achieved and what she's done, and she stayed relatively simple and humble.
Natasha, what's a thing that you do outside of work that you're passionate about or keeps you going?
I think I sort of talked about it already, but it's traveling and meeting people and having new experiences and seeing the world through different perspectives and having great conversations, from conversations with 5-year-olds through to 85-year-olds. I love to hear people's stories, and Italian cooking.
Sorry, what was that last part?
Italian cooking.
Okay. Well, apart from being a judge, a dance judge, tell us something about yourself that people don't know about you.
Okay, so this probably goes back to what's molded me, and it made me smile when you were talking about how engaged and passionate I am. The 12-year-old version of me was not only illiterate, my nickname was the empty chair, because it was more interesting to sit next to an empty chair than me.
Wow.
And so I was the victim of bullying as a young girl, and my perpetrators were other young kids who didn't know better. But I came to a new school as someone's little sister, and my sister had a big personality and a big reputation, and I had all these instant friends. But as soon as my divergency started to come out, I was a different kid. I lost those friends in seconds.
Yep.
And then I was the pariah. I lost interest in school. I lost confidence, and therefore I was at a private girls' school and deemed illiterate. And if I tried hard, I might get a job packing bags at Coles at 15 if I could get through another year of school. And topping the state at physics and getting through my MBA kind of changed my view of myself over the years. But yeah, my personal journey was one where life was not easy and it was cruel for a little bit, but it also contributed to who I am.
Thanks for sharing that with us, because I'm sure there's a lot of people listening to this podcast who, had difficult journeys to get where they are, and probably even are attracted to human resources because of those difficult journeys. So I really appreciate that. Thank you, Natasha, for sharing. Apart from Dolly Parton's America podcast that you've already mentioned, is there a book, movie, TV show, or podcast that you think listeners would you recommend to listeners? Sorry,
so
and why?
The book for me, a book that I hurled across the room in Year 10 because I didn't like it, but ultimately it's got such a great message when it was written and in today's world, is To Kill a Mockingbird.
Ah, yes.
My cat is called Scout after the heroine.
Yep.
And Atticus's speech in the courtroom, I think, has affected me my whole life since I heard it, which was walk a mile in a man's shoes, and don't be too quick to judge those people that are different to you, or a circumstance that you think makes sense. It's easy. So that book resonates with me a lot, and for pure joy and just absurdity, the audio recording of Under Milkwood, by Dylan Thomas, which is a play. I read it at school, but it was a play for radio, and it's set in a fictitious town in Scotland, and the radio play is by one of the main characters is read by Tom Jones, and it is absolutely, if you like the Scottish accent, it's absolutely amazing to listen to, and it's frivolous and silly. It's got a few messages because Lullagrub, the town, is a microcosm of society, and they have all these really outrageous characters, not unlike some of Roald Dahl's characters, but for adults. And it's just a commentary on life, but the very ordinary.
Yes.
How the very ordinary can be quite extraordinary. So that's just a lovely, lovely thing to listen to if you can get your hands on it. And the movie, this comes from my wedding clients a lot. I often ask people when I'm putting a wedding together, because I'm a celebrant, is there a movie or a quote that they like? And the movie that people like in its entirety, it's a sort of a very twee romantic comedy called About Time, but it's about a person. Bill Nye. It's about a person who can travel in time, but only to a certain point, and relive their day. And the whole point of the movie is to get to a point where you don't need to do that, that you live with so much intentionality that you live your perfect day or your best day every day.
Every day.
And that's something to aspire to. And the great thing about that is you can be failing it at 20 to 4 in the afternoon and then make a conscious decision to do better. And you can do that. So, and it's a fun, cute little movie as well. So that'd be my recommendations.
I love About Time. One of my favorite movies. Just that. I mean, I love time travel as it is, but just that whole idea to travel back in time. But at the end, I go, yeah, I can do that, but actually, I now live this day to its fullest and appreciate that day, knowing that I don't need to time travel. I don't need to travel back in time to redo it. And that's a pretty poignant point. I mean, there's so many other amazing points out of it, not of which is the theory of time travel, but let's put that aside for today. Now, there's been so many inspirational moments from today, so many nuggets of gold, so many guidance points, but could you leave us with a quote or moment of inspiration, Natasha?
So I'm gonna go with, I think,
leave us with 2.
Go fiercely in the direction of your dreams. It's not my quote, but whatever you're pursuing, do it hard and with intention.
Yep.
My second quote would be my man Walt, who said, and I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but don't ever forget it all started with a mouse. So, the idea doesn't need to be, mind-boggling or difficult or huge. It started with a mouse. And my quote, and from my experiences mostly over the last 12 months, is the power of yes.
HR Engage podcast today, listeners, we've been left with Natasha, who's given us some amazing quotes, amazing moments of inspiration. I think there's just so many things that I'd love to summarize, but I think if I was to look at what we've all discussed, that whole idea of it's okay to be a little bit different, to try different things, to whatever goals you have, go hard, but also nut it right down to it also did start with a mouse. That whole idea that it is, small ideas, no matter what those ideas are, can turn to something quite big, but there are a lot of hurdles and issues and opportunities you got to traverse all the way through, and just saying yes to opportunities is a good way to get started.
Absolutely.
Natasha, thank you so much for being on the HR Engage podcast.
Thank you for having me. It's been a great time.
And I've had a great time, as usual. So for those at home listening, thank you so much. This is the HR Engage podcast. You're with Jonathan Mamaril. Speak soon.